From London, I'm John Weeks, and this is The Standard. The 2024 general election has been called.
Now is the moment for Britain to choose its future. To decide whether we want to build on the progress we have made or risk going back to square one with no plan and no certainty. Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
Rishi Sunak stepped out from the steps of number 10 in the pouring rain on Wednesday afternoon to reveal the news to the nation. It sent the country into a frenzy, with politics taking over social media, while journalists and political analysts begin to dissect the chances each party has of winning in the run-up to July the 4th. Much has been made of Rishi Sunak's decision to call the election so early in the year, and these Londoners reckon it's a gamble that won't pay off.
I think it is a gamble for him. I hope it doesn't help him. But yeah, I think it's a good thing.
I suspect he'd have stayed on to the autumn if he really thought things were going to get better. So if he's going now, it means he probably knows something we don't.
I think the last election really shows there's decline in faith. I don't think it's a gamble. I think it's a foregone conclusion.
In inner London, the Tories face a possible wipeout following the backing for Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan this month, and with polls back in April suggesting that Labour was on course to win at least 64 seats in London. But could the Conservatives pull back some support in the capital? And how high a priority will London be for Rishi Sunak? Joining me now from our politics team is our chief political correspondent, Rachael Burford, and deputy political editor, Jitendra Joshi. So, a busy day for you both yesterday. Now you're facing a busy month or so ahead. First of all, why do you think Rishi has called the election now?
Well, it's a good question. I suppose there's a few things. Everyone thought it was going to be in October, November time, that it was going to be, they were going to at least have one more financial fiscal event before they called an election. But I suppose if you have it after the summer, you risk, that is the time when most of those small boats are coming over. So you risk perhaps there being a lot more people coming over in those small boats. There is, I suppose, now a kind of, he's taken Labour a little bit off guard, perhaps, and they've still got quite a lot of candidates to select. So they'll be having to select, people to stand in seats when they could be out campaigning. But I think it did confuse a lot of people, and I think a lot of people in the Conservative Party themselves were confused about the timing of this election.
And when you consider the polls looking specifically at London, I understand there's already a prediction that the Tories could be wiped out, certainly in inner London. What's the story there?
So we've got 75 seats in London, and Labour are predicted to win the vast majority of those, about 64 to 65 of those seats. So yes, London is looking very, very good for Labour. Central London is particularly interesting. We've just very recently had the mayoral elections earlier this month, where Sadiq Khan won the West Central seat for the first time. He took that constituency for the first time for Labour, and that is the constituency that includes Kensington and Bayswater seat and the Westminster and Cities of London seat. And the Tories have never lost the Westminster and Cities of London seat. So that's going to be a really interesting one to look out for, because it's one of the sort of most prestigious seats in the country. It includes Buckingham Palace, it includes the House of Commons itself. So if Labour take that seat from the Conservative Party, which they are predicted to do in the polls, that will be a really big coup for them.
Is there a chance, though, that things could still go wrong for Keir Starmer and Labour in London over the next month, even though it is admittedly a small sort of timescale?
On a whole, probably not. But, obviously there are some issues that are big in certain London constituencies. Gaza and what's going on in the Middle East, for example, is a very big issue in certain constituencies. And in the outer London boroughs, ULEZ may be a little bit of a problem still, as it was at the parliamentary by-election in Uxbridge last time. But there's also a few constituencies, safe Labour constituencies, where there hasn't been a candidate selected yet. I think the most notable of those is Islington North, where Jeremy Corbyn has been the Labour MP there for 40 years. He is obviously not standing for the Labour Party this time. Keir Starmer has made that very clear. He will not be a Labour MP again. And there is a short list now, a short list of 2 for the candidate to take on that seat for Labour. Also in that sort of same area, you've got Diane Abbott in Hackney, who is still suspended from the Labour Party, another huge figure in the party, Britain's first black female MP. So she is still suspended from the party. Labour has not yet confirmed whether or not they're looking for another candidate in her Hackney seat, or whether she will get the whip back in time for this election. So I think those 2 particularly are very interesting to watch, because they are big figures on the left of the party. So it'll be interesting to see what happens very much in those 2 seats.
And this goes back to your question about timing, John. It might be clutching at straws, but one of the big themes that Rishi Sunak has been outlining yesterday and this morning in his election pitch is that the world is getting very unsafe, that there's a lot of insecurity and instability and danger out there, and that you're safer under the Tories. Clearly, that's partly aimed at, well, it's explicitly mentioning the situation in the Middle East with Gaza, and that very much preys on one of Labour's weaknesses. Whether it's enough, remains to be seen. But if they're going to get anywhere, Tory strategists clearly are thinking they need to try and leverage whatever wounds they can prey on in terms of where Labour might be a bit weaker.
That's it. And when you look at the national picture, polls over the last 2 or 3 months or so have put Labour between 20 to 30 points ahead of the Conservatives. Could we see the so-called blue wall in the south come crashing down?
Yes, certainly the polling, when you extrapolate it at constituency level, which some of the pollsters are doing, such as YouGov, that polling suggests that a whole slew of cabinet ministers are at risk in seats which you would never think might be in play before. We're looking at people like Jeremy Hunt, Michael Gove, Michelle Donnellan, Penny Mordaunt, all with what usually would be fairly comfortable majorities, 10,000 and up, between 10 and 15,000, being at risk now from either from the Lib Dems in particular in southern England, but also Labour in places like Portsmouth North, where Penny Mordaunt has her seat. And you only have to look at the movements of the party leaders to see where they think they might be able to profit. So we saw Keir Starmer in Kent this morning in a fairly safe Tory seat, Gillingham and Rainham. And we're seeing for the Lib Dems, Sir Ed Davey going to Cheltenham, where the Justice Secretary Alex Chalk is defending a majority of only 981. That Cheltenham majority is unusually slender, but when you're looking at places like where Jeremy Hunt's new constituency, which would be about 8 to 10,000, that should normally be safe, but it's an indictment of where the Tories are at the moment, that those kind of areas are at risk.
Let's take a quick break now. Coming up in part 2, The Standard's Ethan Croft reveals some of the behind-the-scenes drama taking place at Westminster yesterday.
And so there was this loud sound of, a big commotion, lots of people, security guards shouting, "Stay back, keep back."
Joining me now is The Standard's Ethan Croft, who's been following the drama behind the scenes of yesterday's general election announcement. So Ethan, I understand there was a lot going on in and around Westminster, both before and after the general election announcement yesterday. What was it like there?
The atmosphere was pretty giddy. At the start of the day, when the rumours started swirling around, nobody really knew anything, or at least we thought. And then as it sort of became clear that we were heading for an election, people started to lose their sense of self-control slightly. I was standing in Downing Street opposite number 10 with other journalists and various camera crews. We were awaiting the podium. We were waiting for the Prime Minister to come out. It seemed clear that he was about to make this big statement. And then there was a huge commotion behind us. So essentially, the Foreign Office is on the other side of Downing Street, and it has these gates which enter into the Foreign Office courtyard, which stand sort of directly opposite the door of number 10. And so there was this loud sound of, a big commotion, lots of people, security guards shouting, "Stay back, keep back." We thought maybe something really serious was happening. Maybe a protester had got in or, something worse. And then we saw these civil servants coming forward in a huge wave, and they were basically just trying to get to the gate so they could put their phones through and film and take photographs of the Prime Minister when he was doing the speech. So that was quite funny. I spoke to a few of them, and they said that basically the guards had tried to stop them, but they ignored the instructions and just carried on anyway. Then after the announcement, it began to feel a bit like the last day of school, end of term vibes. Obviously, lots of MPs will be sort of leaving Parliament for the last time tomorrow after prorogation. Over 100 of them have said they're stepping down, and lots of other people will be losing their seats involuntarily. There was quite a funny scene in Stranger's Bar, one of the parliamentary bars. A cabinet minister who definitely should not have been in there. He should have been at the Excel Centre with Rishi Sunak and the rest of the cabinet at the political rally. Instead, he turned up at 6 o'clock sharp at the bar and ordered himself 2 bottles of wine. I'm not sure if he was sharing them with somebody else or just going solo. But yes, that was very much the vibe. People kind of making jokes about it being their leaving drinks, etc., etc.
And obviously, news of this election, as you said, seemed to sort of gradually eke out of Westminster throughout the day yesterday. You've discovered who might have got the scoop before the rest of us, haven't you?
Yeah, it was interesting. So obviously the entire parliamentary press gallery was running around like headless chickens, checking Twitter, phoning contacts, trying to find out something, anything, to no avail really until the late afternoon. But it turns out that the people who actually got the scoop before the rest of us were those who were in the crash, because obviously childcare arrangements very much dependent on when Parliament is sitting. And if Parliament is about to be dissolved for a general election going into the summer, then the parents and the carers of the children need to know what they're going to do. And also lots of people who work in Parliament may not have jobs after the general election, so they won't have parliamentary childcare. So yeah, they were given a tip-off in the crash that there would be a summer election a few hours before the rest of us had any idea, and they maintained their discretion to their credit right up until the end.
And on Friday, prorogation will bring an end to the bulk of business in Parliament. Can you tell us how that's linked to getting a potentially cheap haircut at Westminster?
Yes. Well, people often describe Westminster as the Westminster Village, and it does actually bear a great resemblance to a village in the sense that there are many amenities which you can take advantage of if you work there. And one of those is the John Simon Hair Salon, which offers sort of relatively cheap haircuts, at least relatively cheap for central London. And the people who run it, the hairdressers in John Simon, were slightly annoyed yesterday at the announcement of the election because obviously it's very bad for business. It means that they won't be getting people through the door for the next few months probably. So they've come up with a very entrepreneurial solution to this, which is to keep the place open, keep the salon open throughout the sort of 6-week general election campaign and then maybe into summer, and offer anybody who wants it, the chance to have a sort of discounted haircut. And they've also said that people can bring their guests in on a visitor's pass and they can have a wig chop too. So yeah, they're finding a way around it.
Pick up the Evening Standard newspaper for more news, interviews and analysis, or head to standard.co.uk. Thanks for listening. We're back tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock.